This is the final word India-England daily after the third day at Chennai. I'm Adam Collins. With me is Geoff Lemon, who'll tell us all about it in the space of 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds, India resumed 249 ahead, but then wickets started falling. Pujara, Rohit Sharma, Rishabh Pant, Ajinkya Rahane, they all got out, and there was that sense that maybe they were about to fall over. Maybe England could keep it in check. The ball was spitting everywhere. Akshar Patel got out, but then Kohli buckled down with Ravichandran and Ashwin. They batted deep into the second session. They added 96. Kohli was out for 62. Ashwin just kept on going. He made a century, his fifth in Test cricket. They were out with nearly 500 as a lead, and they nabbed 3 wickets before stumps for good measure after day 3.
Very, very nicely done there, Geoff. Just inside the 30 seconds if we had the timer on it. We'll come to Ashwin. He was just phenomenal today. But let's start with Kohli. There was carnage.
Can we start with Ashwin? Like, surely we have to.
Okay, let's start with Ashwin. If you say so. I see you've been cataloguing on your Twitter feed what he achieved today in terms of adding a century to a 5-wicket haul. Where does this put him overall?
Well, he's done that 3 times now, and the only person who's done it more times is Ian Botham. So fairly remarkable. I think Betty Wilson and Enid Bakewell both did it 3 times in women's tests too. Mm-hmm. But it was more the way that 100 was made. But when he came in, those wickets that had fallen in the first session, it was all happening in a hurry. The ball was spitting, it was jumping. It looked like, this might be as bad as a surface as all the England pundits were saying. And it was Ravichandran Ashwin and Virat Kohli who calmed it. They tamed the surface. Ashwin counter-attacked early, kept pulling out the sweep shot, which he said after play he hasn't played since he was 19, but apparently he's been working on it the last couple of weeks. Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, well, they'd used it. They decided it was their counter-attack to Jack Leach was to sweep, and so Ashwin was sweeping from the outset. His second ball he swept for 4. An even 50 partnership at the lunch break, batted reasonably circumspectly deep into the second session, and then when Kohli was out 7 overs before tea, Ashwin took them to tea on 60-odd, and then just kept going after that, and really went up the gears as the other wickets fell at the other end. It was, to bat through the best part of 3 sessions in the day for a number 8 and make his 5th Test 100, it was an exhilarating performance. And when someone's chasing 100 and they're on 80-odd with the number 11 at the other end, they're always some of the best moments of Test cricket.
No, absolutely. And the way that Mohammad Siraj celebrated, he might get himself a nomination for the Hall of Fame in a little bit. He was so elated for his colleague, Ravichandran Ashwin, as you say, making his 5th century in Test cricket. The reason I wanted to raise Kohli first, though, there were 5 wickets inside the first 70 minutes of play this morning, and Kohli had to observe most of that either from the non-striker's end and getting off a pair. It took him 17 or 18 balls to get off the mark initially, and he batted in a faultless manner, not too dissimilar to the second innings at Chennai in the first Test match last week. He couldn't have done anything more right. He just found a way to survive on that track. And look, yes, there's pitch politics everywhere around this week, and I've seen enough of it on Twitter to last me a lifetime. But what is clear is that inside that first hour, the ball was turning square. Can a ball turn more than square? It felt like it was turning more than square early on when Moeen Ali was bowling, and indeed Jack Leach as well. A couple of absolutely brilliant stumpings from Ben Foakes along the way. A run out where Pujara got his bat caught in the track, an unusual way to start the third morning. But it was Kohli who had to survive and make sure that they did get into that second session. And look, don't get me wrong. Had they collapsed and been all out for 100, they still would have had more than enough time. Indeed, had they been all out for 100, this match will be over tonight. They would have already bowled out England in the second innings. So I'm certain of that on the evidence of what we've seen in the final 45 minutes before stumps were pulled on this third evening. But nonetheless, Kohli laid that foundation. When he was joined by Ashwin, had that guy riding shotgun, Ashwin played some fairly outlandish shots at the very start, and you're thinking he's going to have a real pop here. He's going to take the Rishabh Pant approach of the best form of defence is attack. But Kohli spoke to Ashwin early on. He seemed to come together with him at the end of an over and say, no, you've got a job here to do, mate. I need you to bat with me. And they did so. He toned it down a little bit. They got to lunch, and as you say, they accelerated later. It was a fantastic partnership worth 96 runs, and it was right through that middle portion of the day which sucked the life out of the England spin attack.
Yeah, no, I think what we've seen with both teams batting or bowling is that it's been the newer ball that's actually helped the spinners a lot more. That's been the ball that's cut through the surface. It's brought up big chunks of dust and debris, and that's particularly had the extra bounce. That's been almost more of a problem than the spin. If you're talking about it spinning more than square, if a spinner's good enough, they should be able to get the ball to pitch and then bounce back to them. That's when you know you're really putting revs on it. But it wasn't so much the lateral movement as the extreme bounce. So, that's what did in a couple of players. That's what got Rohit Sharma dragging his back foot out. Rishabh Pant came down the wicket one of the few times we've seen him look ordinary trying to hit a six because he wasn't to the pitch of it, and there was just too much elevation as that ball from Jack Leach turned as well. And so there was, you would have thought if England could have bowled out India and been chasing 350, they might have thought, we're a 1% shot of doing something remarkable here. But ending up chasing more like 500, a very different equation. So it still felt to me like it mattered that Kohli and Ashwin were able to put the brakes on things. And in terms of the way Kohli went about that innings, it was fascinating to watch the way he got to the pitch of the ball, the way he faced up against the different spinners in different ways, so that he was outside off stump by the time he received just about any ball from Moeen Ali, the off spinner, meaning that if it hit him on the pad, he was outside the line, and he was smothering that spin, absolutely, pillow over it to make sure nothing would escape to short leg. When he was facing Jack Leach with the ball turning away, then Kohli was staying way leg side of the ball and playing for a straight ball every time and letting the turn go past his edge. But they just got enough loose balls as well, enough full tosses, enough half trackers that they were able to keep a boundary coming every now and then and keep the runs coming and make sure that England eventually stopped feeling like they were on top of things.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the obvious criticism of the England attack. They come out firing and barely bowl a bad delivery in the first 45 minutes or thereabouts. And that's highlighted by the Leach delivery to Rohit Sharma, which spun a mile from leg stump. Rohit had to play Ben Foakes, easy to mix up those two men, his first of the two stumpings. And the second one, Rishabh Pant, again, Jack Leach through the gate. I described it on Twitter as reminiscent of Ian Healy with Shane Warne as far as having to move all the way to the leg side after the ball pitched outside the off stump. That's not easy to do, and it showed Foakes' artistry that he was able to get the bails off so quickly after making the clean take. So, and as far as what you identified there with Kohli's play, I felt that it was almost Pujara-esque, and that's a compliment, I should say, by the way. Him getting down the track to defend and get outside the line of the off stump, or going deep in his crease, way deep in his crease, and playing the ball softly under his eye line. That's hard to do with men around the bat, but Kohli backs his technique, and why wouldn't you when you're a player of his capacity? And he has every right to back his technique against spinners, even in those conditions. But yeah, taken as a whole, I felt as though Leach tired a little bit towards the end of the first session. Moeen Ali hasn't been super consistent at any stage through the test match. It's been more about he's bowled some excellent deliveries, but he hasn't really dotted them up. Joe Root bowled himself occasionally. We seldom saw Broad or Stone. We saw them in bursts more in the second and third session, but not a lot before lunch. But it didn't quite pay off for England. So, look, they were always chasing their tail. They were miles behind the game. But there was some, I suppose there were some green shoots, Geoff, to the extent that Jack Leach keeps taking wickets. Ben Foakes is a serious wicketkeeper. He's creating chances behind the stumps. So, in terms of thinking about what might be possible next week when they play the third test match, they're both in the series.
Well, there was, you could sort of feel England giving up just before lunch when they brought Dan Lawrence on to have a bowl, and Stuart Broad had come on just before that.
That first ball, that first ball that Lawrence bowled, that turned a mile as well. I mean, I have to say it was a long shot, but I know they went upstairs and that was a very poor review. But he's one to watch, I reckon, Lawrence, with his bowling.
The Ben Foakes love-in, there's going to be a lot more momentum behind the Ben Foakes must be England's wicket-keeper sort of train. And that's justified because, he was outstanding for the most part. The criticism you could make is his decision to stand up to the stumps to Stuart Broad. Maybe it was Joe Root's decision, I'm not sure. But that did backfire because there were two edges from Ashwin, one of which went to the left of Stokes at first slip, who was standing very close at first slip. And if, had the wicket keeper been back, that would have been a keeper's catch. And the other was a catch to Foakes himself standing up to the stumps, both of them off Ashwin, one in the 30s, one in the 50s when Ashwin was on those scores. Both went down. Ashwin went on to make 100 and rub their faces into the dirt. There was another chance missed off Leach by Foakes, but that one, there was actually a little edge from Ashwin that forced the ball down, forced it very low. So Foakes was coming up with the ball and really had no chance to get down to either take that catch or affect the stumping when Ashwin gave it the charge. And he missed it, but he didn't entirely miss it. He did just get a nick on it, a toe end that forced it down. So that'd be the only question mark over the Ben Foakes action today. The praise today would be standing up to the stumps to Broad. And how like Stuart Broad is it to not bowl for so long, to come on just before the lunch break and then have a catch dropped in his first over? How many chances go down off Stuart Broad? I know he's got a tally of well over 100 of the 500 plus wickets that he does have. There've been 100 other chances that could have been taken.
Yeah, and I think with the coming up to the stumps, it stands to reason on the basis of how slow it was coming through. And you'd think that given how well Foakes does keep up to the stumps, that he might be able to engineer another stumping. But yeah, it didn't pay off for England today. And I suppose they were in a stage of the game where they had to create something. They had to get resourceful. I get where they were coming from, but hey, look, as I said before, they were so far behind when they started the third morning that everything needed to go right, and even had everything gone right, they still had really lost the game on that second afternoon, so it was more or less a moot point. Geoff, in terms of the player of the day, we've already touched on Ashwin once before. Let's go back there again. I mean, the overall figures, the fact that he's been so able to back up a fine performance with the ball, with the bat. Not all players are able to do that, but he sort of feeds off one discipline with the other. We saw that with Mitchell Johnson, didn't we, in his Test career, that when he was making runs, often wickets would follow. Cliched as it was to say that towards the end of his career, perhaps, but Ashwin has that habit as well, a good habit to have.
Yeah, and he is a chance in this Test to join the very select club of players who've made a Test 100 and taken 10 wickets in the same Test match. That, from memory, is only Imran Khan, Ian Botham and Shakib Al Hassan in the men's, I think, and Enid Bakewell and Betty Wilson in the women's. So 5 players all up who've each done that once apiece. Ashwin, although he's got Akshar Patel getting in his way, taking wickets at the other end, 2 of the 3 wickets to fall to Akshar, but Ashwin's got 1 already, so he just needs 4 out of the remaining 7 on the last day, and you'd imagine he'll be doing a fair bit of the bowling on the final day.
And Akshar, who already has 2 wickets to his name in the 4th innings, should really have a 3rd. Joe Root, extremely lucky to be let off within moments of the close of play. Left arm around the wicket, his orthodox spin, the one that went straight on. Root misread it, deep in the crease, hit him on the back pad. Remarkably wasn't given out on the field, and went umpire's call because it hit him, fractionally outside the line, or should I say maybe 49% of the ball hit him inside the line, or however they calculate these matters. But after losing Jack Leach's first ball around the corner, the night watchman, Joe Root, did have to go in. I would have liked to have seen a second night watchman, but that's by the by. And Root really should be out as well. And I joked on Twitter that had Root fallen then, they should have asked for the extra half an hour, because they would have every chance of taking the remaining wickets before what would have been the adjusted close of play.
Yeah, well, that one was, Kohli was pretty furious, and anyone who's trying to suggest that the umpires are somehow partisan towards India, look, Kohli had 4 runs taken off him that were given as leg byes. He got a warning for running on the pitch when he crossed over when he was coming back for a 3rd run when he was batting, and there was that decision. There have been a lot of arguments between Virat Kohli and the umpires. They're not just going along with what he wants, so don't worry too much about that. But look, he did bat superbly today. The bright spot for England out of the day is Ben Foakes with the gloves, and aside from that, they've just got to try to get something out of it tomorrow. Like have a couple of players find a way to fight for a while, to bat for a couple of hours. Ashwin showed it can be done. If you get through that difficult early part of the innings, you can stick around for a while in the middle, and so they'll need that experience to stand them in any sort of stead moving forward to the 3rd and 4th tests.
So Ashwin, player of the day. Geoff, we have to induct a new member to our Hall of Fame. I'll kick us off. I love the idea that Andrew Sampson relayed to us during the afternoon that Ben Foakes is the only cricketer to effect 2 stumpings on his birthday. Of course, he celebrated his 28th birthday today, and we've already talked about him at great length. But yes, the only player on their birthday to get 2 stumpings. Over to you.
Yeah, well, I think Josh Butler hasn't had many stumpings either in 50-odd test
One in his
matches.
career.
Yeah, so Foakes has gone past him in one afternoon. I did mention Stuart Broad not bowling until the 44th over of a test match innings. Has that ever happened before in a match he's played in? I doubt it. That was pretty good for one. Also, the fact that before he'd bowled, he went trying to chase down a boundary that I think Ashwin had struck down the ground, and just gave it everything. He furiously pursued it. He flung himself after it and then crashed into the fence so hard that he ripped a giant hole in the knee of his trousers. And that was how much energy he had, because he hadn't been called upon to do anything else in terms of a bowling spell. So I enjoyed that one.
That sounds good enough to me. Geoff, let's go with that. And as far as throwing forward, I mean, look, there's not a lot to take from this test match from competitive balance perspective. We know that India are going to win tomorrow. They'll probably win inside the first 90 minutes to a session at most, you'd imagine. But the one man that might stand in their way could be Dan Lawrence. Now, Dan Lawrence had a double failure in the first test match. He struggled at the second time of asking in Sri Lanka, but played a couple of very nice aggressive shots before stumps tonight, including one big 6 over long on. Using his feet, we know how adept he is through the onside. That's where there is something to be found for England tomorrow, I reckon. It's as far as trying to look ahead to the Test series and not completely losing their bundle. If a player like Lawrence can assert himself after Burns and Sibley have both fallen early, that will do him the world of good, considering it is a 4-test match series.
Yeah, it will. And look, we will see whether there is anything to discuss like that tomorrow. Or we could be talking about one of the great test matches of all time being set up for a terrific 5th day. You know, who knows? Test cricket in 2021, you don't want to rule anything out at this point.
No, fair enough. We'll be here, of course, on the India-England Daily. This is The Final Word. Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon. If you like what we do, patreon.com/The Final Word. And we'll do it all again at Stumps tomorrow when the game will almost certainly be over.